shoulda known better. Bizarre and preventable man-made disasters. We've all done it. You leave your marshmallow Peeps in the microwave for too long and set your kitchen on fire. Or you try making it through the winter without snow tires and cause a multi-car pileup. Well, you should have known better. But at least you didn't explode an entire city like these guys. All of the events I'm about to describe were totally unnatural and completely preventable, if the company in question had spent even a couple minutes thinking about safety. These are bizarre and preventable man-made disasters. Our first weird and preventable disaster struck Boston in January 1919. It was a flood as sticky as it was tragic, the Great Boston Molasses Flood. In North Boston, there used to be a massive 50-foot-tall tank, used for storing up to 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Now, if you weren't born in 19-3, you might not know what molasses is. It's a syrup made from sugar, and you can either make it into rum or explosives, whatever you like. Well, that 50-foot-tall tank was a piece of crap, frankly, and the unusually warm weather caused the molasses to ferment and produce gas. The gas ruptured the tank, which then spilled all 2 million gallons of goo into downtown Boston. Imagine being eaten alive by the blob, except the blob is 25 feet high and moves at 35 miles per hour. It knocked down buildings and even railroad tracks. 21 men, women, and children were crushed or suffocated. The company settled with the victims for $600,000. Our second preventable disaster was also a flood, but a much more deadly one. It was the 1889 Johnstown Flood, caused by the failure of South Fork Dam in western Pennsylvania. Over 2,000 people were killed. The flood was caused when a man-made lake was sold to rich steel barons who wanted to turn it into a vacation spot. The millionaires wanted to drive their horses and buggies around the lake, so they tore off the top of the South Fork Dam to build a road. While they were at it, they also sold the dam's pipes, which were supposed to release excess water. Who needs those, right? In the end, the 70-foot-high, 1,000-foot-wide dam was not only lower than before, but also had no way to release water in an emergency. Right below the dam, there were several steel factories and Johnstown itself. Most of the population were poor immigrants. Then on May 31st, 1889, the inevitable happened, when the dam broke. In all, 2,208 people drowned. The survivors sued the steel barons, but lost the case. Well, those two disasters might be a bit old, but our third disaster is so recent, some victims are still in the hospital. On June 27, 2015, a fire broke out in New Taipei City, Taiwan, burning over 500 people. The disaster happened when a local water park decided to host a party called Color Play Asia. The idea was to use colored cornstarch for an effect during a concert. If you've ever seen photos from an Indian Holi party, then you'll get an idea what they were going for. Except, instead of just throwing fistfuls of powder on each other, the organizers used compressed gas to spray it into the air. The air became so thick with cornstarch that it effectively became a thermal bark bomb. A spark from the stage caused the cloud of powder to ignite and engulfed 500 young partygoers in flames. 15 people eventually died from their wounds. Our fourth preventable disaster was kind of similar. It was the largest non-nuclear explosion in history, and it was all caused by fertilizer. We're talking about the Texas City disaster of 1947. Texas City is a major industrial port on the Gulf Coast. It's also home to oil refineries and chemical factories. In 1947, Houston knew fertilizer was dangerous and didn't let ships dock there, but Texas City was all right with it. So, in April 1947, two huge cargo ships, containing over 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate, were parked at the docks. On April 16th, the SS Grand Camp caught fire. Spectators gathered on the shoreline to watch the pretty orange smoke. Then, the Grand Camp exploded. That explosion ignited the Monsanto chemical factory, which also exploded. Then, the SS High Flyer, which was also full of fertilizer, exploded. Of the 581 people killed in the disaster, 113 were completely vaporized. 5,000 people were also injured. Our fifth bizarre disaster was actually just a blizzard, but it took human negligence to make it extra deadly. It was the 1888 Schoolhouse Blizzard, also known as the Children's Blizzard, which killed 235 people in one day. On January 12, 1888, the weather in Nebraska suddenly warmed above freezing, causing many parents to send their children to school without heavy winter clothing. This was their first mistake. After the children arrived at school, the temperature suddenly plummeted 40 degrees, and huge volumes of snow fell. Teachers had to decide whether to keep their kids in their freezing schoolhouses or send them home before it got worse. It turned out that the first option was better. Any children attempting to walk home were quickly lost in a complete whiteout and froze. Teachers who attempted to lead the students themselves also froze. The ones who rode out the storm by burning desks in their schools survived. All of the 235 dead, mostly students, were only found later. Our number 6 preventable disaster is another lesson in not storing huge volumes of explosive stuff in residential areas. It was the 1927 Pittsburgh Gasometer Explosion. First of all, a gasometer is one of those big round towers full of gas. Nowadays, a large one holds around 2 million cubic feet of gas. But back in 1927, this one in Pittsburgh contained 5 million cubic feet, the largest in the world. On November 14th, workmen arrived to fix a gas leak using acetylene torches. As you might expect, the torches ignited the gas leak, which ignited the 5 million cubic foot tower. The fireball destroyed buildings in an area 1 mile in diameter, and 28 people were killed. They don't make them that big anymore. Our number 7 disaster is an example of a bad idea that turned out badly. It was the Gillingham Fair fire disaster of 1929. During a summer fair in the town of Gillingham, England, the local fire department wanted to demonstrate their skills. So they set fire to a building with 15 firefighters and young boys on the upper floors. The plan was to pump smoke into the building, rescue the occupants, and then set it on fire for real afterward. Unfortunately, the building caught fire right away. The unprepared firefighters were too slow, and all 15 men and boys inside perished. The townsfolk thought it was all part of the show until afterward. Our 8th and final disaster combines several themes we've seen before: dust, fire, industrial neglect, and sugar. It was the Imperial Sugar Explosion of 2008. The accident occurred at a 100-year-old sugar refinery in Georgia. This sugar factory made 9% of the refined sugar used in the US, but its machines were out of date. Sugar dust was allowed to build up on the lower floors. Then, on the night of February 7, 2008, an explosion ripped the middle out of the factory, blowing it sky high. Helicopters circling the factory found a site more like the Chernobyl disaster than a sugar factory. 14 workers were killed and 40 were injured. The government found that Imperial Sugar operated with intentional disregard for the safety of their employees. Well, that's all the terrible events we have time for today. Maybe next time we'll cover the most bizarre accidents that didn't happen. Except nobody reports those. Oh well, good night!